There were a lot of electronic drums at this year's UK Drum Show. Admittedly, many of them were here last year, but some certainly weren't. I had the chance to play the Roland VAD716 with the new V71 module. I got behind the Zildjian Alchem-E kit for the first time. And speaking of first times, the eDrum workshop had a physical presence at this year's show. Over at the eDrum workshop booth, I had 6 modules set up with my personal E-kit. All the triggers were hooked up to the TD50X, sending MIDI out to all the other modules, and then the master outputs were hooked up to a mixer so drummers were able to bounce between the different modules at will. They were loaded up with practically all of the kits and instruments available over on my store, and I even set up a couple of microphones so that we could talk when it got loud. And it did get loud. I left a few stock kits on the modules so that people could hear the difference between those presets and my own. Needless to say, impressions were really positive and a lot of people had fun. This is the kind of in-person feedback I just can't get from online sales, and it was amazing to watch all the great players do their thing. If you were at the show and you came over to the booth, thank you so much. It was great to meet you all, and it was honestly a fantastic experience. The only downside was that I wasn't able to spend as much time on the show floor as usual, and unfortunately my on-the-go audio recording method failed me. So if you're looking for audio examples of the new Roland or Zildjian kits, there are far better recordings to be found on YouTube already to go check out. I will definitely have some more myself down the line for the Roland module and hopefully for the Zildjian one. However, I will be able to give you my first impressions of these kits along with some other gear and talk more generally about where electronic drums are heading into 2025. My booth was directly opposite the Alesis stand. It's been quite a few years since they've been at the drum show, and they were showing off the new Strata Prime flagship kit along with the Nitro Pro and Nitro Max kits, as well as the Alesis Strike Multipad. Now, I didn't get the chance to try anything at the booth, but I do have an Alesis Strata Prime kit myself, and you can see my initial experience with it in a video that's already on this channel. Otherwise though, impressions from the booth were pretty positive from a lot of the people that I spoke to. There have been a couple of updates since that video, so it does seem that Alesis are committed to improving it. Right next door to me was Eich Amplification, showing off their drum and bass thrones. These are similar in idea to the likes of the old Pearl throne thumpers, butt kickers, or the more premium options like Porter and Davies thrones, which as far as I can tell they've probably got the most in common with. They had the throne hooked up to what I believe is a GEWA G5 studio kit with GEWA's new cymbals. More on those later. I've always liked the idea of these throne amps, but I've never personally found the need to use one myself. However, from the brief playtest that I had, this one certainly gave my arse a wobble. Just a stone's throw from my booth, though I didn't throw anything, that was definitely not on my risk assessment, was the Zildjian booth. I think this was the first UK outing for the Alchem-E kits, so it was great to get a few minutes to try one of them out, though my first impressions are a bit of a mixed bag. The good news is that I do think the sounds were better to play than I expected from hearing the demo videos online. On some of those demo videos, I always thought that the cymbals sounded pretty good, but some of the drums felt a little bit too dry and flat. In person, they definitely have an EFNOTE or ATV quality to them, as I'd gathered, but they felt a little livelier than I expected, and all the cymbals sounded great. The main problems that I had were with the triggering. The drum head zones seemed fine, but the rim triggering was inconsistent at best, especially at lower velocities. I was getting a lot of bounce from the kick drum, which was leading to double taps. Now this is mainly a physical thing, and it might have just been the tension, or it might be due to the head itself. I'm quite used to thicker heads on kick drums these days, and I think this was just a 2-ply. It's probably possible to remedy this, but it's not really my favourite feel. The crashes and ride cymbals mostly did what I expected when I expected them to, which was good to see because on some of the videos I've noticed quite a bit of mistriggering before. So fingers crossed this means that they are being improved, but it's a little bit too early for me to tell with the short time that I had with the kit. The cymbal chokes seem to function well. However, the hi-hat open to closed transitions didn't feel great, and sometimes it would randomly miss an open hi-hat. But I don't mean that it just played a closed sound, I mean it literally went silent. I didn't have any time to try dialing anything in, so I wouldn't write this off without more time spent with the kit. The cymbals did feel nice to play on as well. I just don't know how the overall triggering will hold up to scrutiny. Hopefully I'll get a chance to have a proper play with the kit and see if any of these problems can be remedied. The model that I demoed was the Alchem-E Bronze EX, and I literally chose that one because it was the first one I came to, but they also had the Alchem-E Gold and the Alchem-E Gold EX on display. Now this is the part where usually I would say how much of a shame it is that exhibition floor kits are almost always badly dialed in, as is often the case with floor models at shops. And while I do still think this, I do have a bit more of an appreciation for how difficult it is to try and set up a kit that could please everybody. At my booth, I tried to watch how players were hitting and then swap the global trigger sensitivity of my TD50X module to match their style, but you can only do so much in the moment. The kick head on my kit also slackened off partway through the second day as it got utterly pounded at times. Fortunately, I spotted it and fixed it after a short while, but there's every chance that some people played it and it was double triggering. So I can see how floor kits can very quickly lead to a bad playing experience. However, I did get a lot of positive comments about how well my kit was set up compared to pretty much all the other ones on display. And this is really handy because I'm beginning to offer setup sessions to people in the UK. If this is a service that you think you might need, get in touch and we'll discuss it. So making our way around the floor, GEWA's booth was a familiar sight from my last few years at the show. However, one thing did catch my eye, the new NIO cymbals. I had a brief moment to try these out at the end of day one and I think they're great. They're very similar to ATV and EFNOTE cymbals, which are probably my favourite type these days. They have a nice profile, the bell sizes are decent, they flex well, they feel nice under the stick, and they're all triple zone too, which is great. I tried them out on the Club G3 kit, and the triggering also felt really responsive. I was told that the cymbals were redesigned following feedback from their previous cymbals. It's great to see GEWA continue to refine what they're doing. The overall triggering of the kit that I played felt better than I remember from my review of the G9. I'm pretty sure I remember improvements last year too, so it seems that they're building on it every year. The three distinct Studio, Club and Pro configurations have also really fleshed out their lineup. As with last year, Evans was showing off their hybrid sensory percussion system. Check out last year's video for my initial thoughts on that if you're interested. EFNOTE also had their booth set up similarly to last year, and I heard a lot of positive impressions from people who tried them out. The EFNOTE Pro kit setup was a bit smaller than last year's and featured the darker finish, which I think looks great in person. The new EFNOTE mini kit was also on show in place of the 5 from last year. It's not really my bag, but it does look really fun to play. I didn't get the chance to get behind it. If you want to hear me play an EFNOTE Pro and hear my full thoughts on that playtest, check out last year's video. Unfortunately, there was no sign of Yamaha again this year, other than a single DTX 10K kit at the Rock School tuition booth, and that's a shame. Over at the DW booth they were showing off the DWE. Since I've got one of these at the workshop, I didn't take any time out to go and play it. If you want to hear my incredibly in-depth thoughts about it, I've got an hour-long review video that you can check out. Upstairs there was a whole room dedicated to electronic drum presentations, performances and masterclasses called the eDrum Experience Lab, put together by DigitalDrummer magazine's Alan Leibowitz. I clearly picked the wrong year to have my own booth as I couldn't get over to see any of these performances. However, Alan was kind enough to send over some footage from a few of the experiences. As usual, Michael Shack was bringing tons of energy to his Roland VAD716 demonstration. I also really like that new finish on the VAD kits. Vicky O'Neon showed off some creative uses for Ableton Live with a setup containing a mix of the SPD-SX Pro, a Zildjian Alchem-E Gold EX kit, and plenty of percussion.
1, 2, I'm going to start the lead from here. 1, 2, 3, go!
The whole thing crescendoed into a percussive party, which I love. Chris Turner, who I've been told has previously said he would never use electronics or trigger samples, was demonstrating the DWE kit alongside his new, I think as of yet unreleased, VST. What a beast. There were many other highlights too, so it looks like visitors had the chance to see a lot of different variations on electronic drums and their uses over the weekend. Outside the eDrum lab, Jobeky had a stand in this lovely, quiet area. What a great idea. They had 2 kits set up showing off their various triggers, real feel cymbals and low volume cymbals, powered by some Roland modules. I tried the real feel cymbals out last year at the show, and I remember them feeling nice to play on and triggering well from my short playtest. A new highlight for Jobeky are their fast fit triggers, designed to be quickly and easily dropped into your drums without the need to unscrew any hardware. Though I didn't get time to try them out, I do have some of these at the workshop waiting to be reviewed. So I'll begin testing these soon and have a review in the not too distant future. Just don't rush me, I've got a holiday booked first. Right, okay, it's Roland time. On Sunday morning, I got the chance to chat with Jules, Roland's brand manager, and we discussed the approach to the new kits and the sounds included in the new module. I then playtested the new VAD716 kit, along with the V71 module. The rest of the booth contained the TD716 kit and the TD713 kit, a VAD507, what I believe was a TD17KV2, and then a table of multipads made up of the SPD-SX, SPD-SX Pro, SPD-30 Octopad, and SPD-20 octopads. The majority of these have been covered in other capacities on this channel, so I'll focus on the obvious shiny new thing. I'm going to let Jules tell you about the products and the approach himself, and I'll intersperse my thoughts about it from the playtest as we go.
You've got new kits here, and you've got a new module here. Could you tell me a little bit more about it?
Yeah. So the vDrum 7 series, essentially a new module and 3 new kits in the lineup. So we've got the V71 module, or the V71, and then we've got the TD716, and we've got the TD713. So across that series, we've got kind of 1 acoustic design kit and 2 electronic kits, all at different price points, yeah.
So there's some hardware differences as well with, say, the digital snare. Was it the rim's different and there's a throw-off? Is that based on feedback, or is that based on just what you guys wanted to do? Or
I think a little bit of feedback,
yeah.
But yeah, there's an innovation piece as well. I mean, as a drummer, right, having the ability to throw the snare on and off, you would do that virtually in the module before.
Yes.
Using the V-Edit system. And cool as that is, you know, as you're playing and you want to tap into those textures and those sounds, etc., it's not instant. And if you're playing an acoustic kit, the experience would be like, there it is, I've thrown my snare off, got that sound and put it back on, particularly if you're the player that likes to throw the snare on and off during playing. So yeah, we've developed that snare strainer to allow you to do that. I think it's really elegant. It's got a nice action to it. As you pull the snare wires on, you hear the connection of the snare wires with the snare head, which is awesome. And then the knurled knob is your tension adjuster, which again adjusts the tension in the snare the same as it would on an acoustic snare drum.
So all in real time.
All in real time, but it's also got a sort of tactile button press feel to it as well. So you can actually turn that into a function if you want to. You could assign a function to that to maybe turn something off or trigger something or whatever. So it's really cool. And it's got a light in there. The LED light in there matches the light on the module as well, which is cool. It's got no other feature other than that it looks nice.
And sometimes that's all we want.
Exactly.
From the short time that I spent playing this kit, the new snare definitely felt great to play. This shouldn't really be that surprising because the previous digital snare is my favourite electronic snare drum. I love the feel of the 3-ply head and it performs really well in terms of dynamics and positional sensing. I've never really had a big problem with the height of the rim, but that's definitely the least natural feeling part of that drum. So this new low profile rim design on the PD-14DSX is a very welcome change and it feels great to hit. I also really enjoy having the option of throwing off the snare on the DWE kit, so it's great to have it here too. The ability to adjust the snare strainer really rounds things out and makes the entire thing much more intuitive than menu diving. I'm also glad that they let it be used as a function button so that you can do other things with it. That's one huge benefit of electronics that I wish everybody took more advantage of, because sometimes acoustic purity doesn't need to be the goal. As far as the rest of the kit goes, that's pretty much the same as the previous 706 model. I didn't have the chance to try out the new tom pads on the TD-713, unfortunately.
So tell me a little bit more about the new module. One of the things that I hear a lot about Roland drums is various opinions about the sounds. I'm aware that you've updated the sounds quite a lot in this new module. So could you tell me a little bit more about the sort of the process, or at least the idea behind what you were going for with the new sounds?
Yeah, definitely. So eDrum sound modules, we've always recorded audio in studios, multi-layered audio, multi-sampled, there's different sample layers in the module. We've always done that. How we process that audio, or how you treat that audio in terms of EQ and all that kind of stuff, has always been more to our preference, the sound that we like, or the sound that we think is good. And then we've always applied to that our technology, so COSM, composite object sound modelling, which allows the kind of changing of a drum head or a shell depth or a cymbal diameter, those kind of material changes. That's one technology, and the other one is behaviour modelling, which is the prismatic, previous to that the supernatural, etc., which is all about response. It's not about sound, it's about the transition between those sample layers and how smooth they are, and the reaction that you get. This is the thing that we fundamentally believe at Roland is an advantage in terms of that reaction. So again, it's about the reaction. So as you change between sample 1, sample 2, sample 3, sample 4, sample 5, etc. on playing, let's say, a ride cymbal, you're not going to hear that jump. And therefore you're not going to get that machine gunning effect, because there's just a smoothing of the transition between those in a very realistic, very natural way. But I think there's been a misconception that actually, because of those algorithms that we have inside the module, our sounds are faked or they're digitally created, which is not true. They come from audio.
Yeah, synthesize is what you hear a lot, isn't it?
Absolutely. Stands to reason, Roland's a synthesizer company as well, so I can understand that, that conclusion basically. But that's not always been the case. However, we are keenly aware of all the comments, etc., out there and the thoughts in the market. We also know that a lot of our customers have been using modules and then connecting to a VST for all the reasons why, because of VST, 100% sample based, many gigabytes of data, etc. So that kind of stands to reason. But we've also got the fundamental philosophy. If you buy a Roland product and a sound module that costs you, a good chunk of money, that's got all this technology in it, to then just take a cable from it and only connect it to a VST, and that's the only thing that you do with it, you're kind of spending a lot of money for good sensing and good playability, only to trigger a VST. So we went back to the drawing board and said, okay, let's look at what the customer wants and what would be the benefit for the customer. Let's start with that. So we acknowledged the VST thing, both in terms of sound, but also in terms of having that option. And that's where our collaboration with DW, Roland bought DW 2 years ago, obviously, and DW Soundworks was created for the DWE, and we were like, this is such a great sound in VST, why don't we make that available to the vDrum 7 Series customer as well? So every customer that gets a vDrum 7 Series will have access to DW Soundworks.
So my impressions of the sounds isn't fully formed yet due to the environment that we were in. However, it was still evident enough that the sounds are an obvious step up from the TD50 and 50X in a lot of areas that I think actually matter. I've always felt that there's a sort of mid-range and upper mid-range frequency presence that's just missing from the other modules that I've used, and it's difficult to coerce those frequencies out of the sounds even when you're adding EQ. This area in particular feels much better on the V71, and I think that'll go a long way for the majority of people who might be interested in these kits or this module. It's hard to explain exactly why without just using the frequencies as the measure, but it just has a more natural and sort of in-your-face sound than the more scooped and clean-sounding 50X, but still in a more controlled and not aggressive way.
So what sort of a difference in experience then would you expect to have when you play this versus hooking it up to DW Soundworks?
So I think in terms of difference, it might be even easier to talk about similarities in a way.
Sure, yeah.
So DW Soundworks, 100% sample based, so lots of gigabytes of data obviously, lots and lots of different sample layers and all of that kind of stuff. And then it's mixed and treated in a way that it is for DW Soundworks. You can't just drag and drop a sample from Soundworks straight into the module. For a number of reasons, memory size, plus it wouldn't then work with the behaviour modelling technology, etc., and so on and so forth. So we have to treat those two things differently. But what we do is we do a single sampling session. Say that happens in Oxnard, for example. Yes. We will then, as a team, all work on that sampling session together. We would complete that work, and then we would do a mix of that for DW Soundworks and put all of that kind of sound files, etc., that you need for that to create that. What we would then do is also do a mix for vDrums as well, for the vDrum 7 series. So it's a slightly different process, but what we do is we use the exact same samples, the exact same recording, and just make that available for the module as a downloadable pack from Rolling Cloud. So it doesn't really matter what you're playing, whether it's sounds inside the module of let's say it's a Drum Workshop 50th anniversary kit, or whether you're playing a Drum Workshop 50th anniversary kit inside DW Soundworks, you're hearing the same samples. Right. They sound the same, basically. So it's more that similarity, and that's really what we've gone for. So whether you're offline in a module, you've downloaded the pack, you go into the gig and you're playing that, or whether you're playing DW Soundworks at home in a studio, you should be getting the same or a very similar sound experience and playing experience between the two.
Brilliant. All right, I think it's all going to get a bit noisy here soon, isn't it? So maybe we'll leave it there, but thank you very much, Jules.
No worries. Cheers, Luke. Thanks a lot, mate.
Cheers. Thank you.
Now, I have used Soundworks quite a lot, so it was interesting to hear these sounds in a Roland module. I do think that Jules is right that there are going to be plenty of similarities between the VST and this module, and that for a lot of people's use cases, I think that choosing between them is going to come down to preference, whether that's the exact sounds or a preference of workflow. I do think a lot of the times that the small details you notice in isolation get sort of papered over if you're using your kit for recordings or live performances. However, a lot of people do play their eDrums in isolation, and I do think that's where any differences are most likely to be noticed. I'll have to reserve my judgment on what those differences might be until I've had longer with the module. If you do want to hear Soundworks running through a Roland TD50X's virtual overheads and room ambiances to compare to this module, go check out the video I've linked in the top corner and in the description. It's surprisingly timely now that this new kit is out. One thing that's evident from this year's UK Drum Show is that the obsession with electronic drums emulating acoustic drums is continuing full steam into 2025. There were a few more electronic-leaning setups at a couple of booths that I didn't get a lot of time to look at properly, but electronics for the sake of electronics are becoming more and more elusive. I'm of the opinion that this is largely a circumstantial consequence. And if you want to know what I mean by that, go check out this video about the two kinds of electronic drummer. Thanks for sticking around. If you're thinking of heading to the the UK Drum Show next year, let me know in the comments, and hopefully I'll see you there.
I'm so sorry.
I'll go for the top of that bit.
Sure.
So